And just waiting on the minute taker. Andrew's had a problem. Okay, let's get started. If we could please stand for acknowledgement of country, diversity, commitment and service acknowledgement and prayer. The City of Victor Harbor acknowledges the Ramangeri and the Ngarrindjeri people, the traditional custodians of the land and the surrounding waters where we live and where we work. We acknowledge their deep connection to country and we pay our respects to their elders past, present and their emerging elders. This respect is extended to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australia and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people that are here today with us.
The City of Victor Harbor is committed to diversity, equity and inclusion. We respect people of all ages, abilities, genders, sexualities, beliefs, religions, cultures and backgrounds.
We recognise the brave individuals who have served and continue to serve our nation. Remember those who've lost their lives and paid the ultimate sacrifice to our country.
Mighty God, we ask you to bless and allow it to be an age of direct and prosperous nations.
Amen. Please be seated. It's lovely to see so many people in the gallery who are interested in council. Welcome to you all. And I know that we have a number of ladies from the Encounter Bay Probus Club that are watching online tonight. And so welcome to everybody who is watching online. I hope you get something out of the council deliberations tonight. As we go through and you learn a little bit more about how the City of Victor Harbor operates and how our council operates. We do have some apologies tonight. Councillor Mackenzie is on leave and Councillor Quinton unfortunately is not well, and Carlos Councillor Corimba will be late. We do have one item that is adjourned and lying on the table that we need to address first. And that is the town crier guidelines. There is a current motion before council that was moved by Councillor Quinton and seconded by Councillor Henderson. That motion is that council approve the town crier guidelines to be applied in parallel with the Victor Harbor Town Crier job description and protocols document. Because it has been some time since this recommendation was discussed, I will ask Councillor Henderson, who seconded it. I note that Councillor Quinton's not here, if there's anything that she would like to add before we go back to the debate.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Does anybody want to add anything to the debate? Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. I've gone through, read the amendments and quite comfortable with the proposed changes. The only thing I would request is that where it says there's connection with European history, it actually states British and European history. And also in the job description, there was an approval by the Chamber to have the town crier attend all gazetted holidays and events, and that's been removed. And that needs to be put back in.
All right, I'll just see whether or not we can first of all add the first point,
Yep.
Which was, can you just state that again,
Sure.
please?
It was under appropriate use of the town crier. There was a reference to, just above that was have a connection with European history. That should actually be British and European history
Okay.
because it's very different.
I'll note that to.
And everything else was fine.
Note that to be
And I think it's
changed.
also on page 14 as well.
And I'll just ask the CEO to outline the job description. I don't think we're addressing the job description tonight. So we're only addressing the town cry guidelines
Sure.
tonight. We may
Guidelines.
need to update that job description at a further
Sure.
time. Okay. Are there any further discussion in relation to this item? Councillor Kemp?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'm not supporting the current rewrite of the performance guidelines because, you know, we talk about the sensitivities of the First Nation, but I'm thinking about the sensitivities of white Australians, and to utilise Australia Day as an example is a bad thing for First Nations in a document of council, I believe is wrong, and I would like to see that word Australia Day taken out and struck from that area because I am offended that Australia Day is used as a weaponised against, you know, for the reasons for First Nations people as to be too sensitive. I'm a proud Australian. It's a multicultural country. I see Australia Day as bringing together a multicultures to celebrate a fantastic country. And I see that's how I see it. I'm unfortunate. Other people see it differently. That's their personal choice. But to have it in a council document, I think is wrong. That's my first one.
Did you want to move an amendment, Councillor Kemp?
Yes, I would like to move the amendment to strike out the, for example, Australia Day.
Strike out, for example, Australia Day, or strike out Australia
Strike
Day?
out the statement, for example, Australia Day.
Do you have a second for that motion? Councillor Burns seconding that. All those in favour of the motion? Oh, hang on, sorry. Oh, sorry, it's an amendment, not a formal motion. Do you want to speak to the amendment?
Well, I've already spoken to the reasons why I want that, but also there's another statement in the guidelines which I feel could be removed, and I think the statement in this is required to occur prior to the event and meet with the concurrence of the relevant parties.
Sorry, Councillor Kemp, you've got an amendment on the floor that's been seconded. Do we want to debate your amendment?
Look, fine. I'll leave the other one, but I just feel that, as I said before, I just feel that having Australia Day there as an example of what upsets First Nations people, I just feel is inappropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Burns, do you want to?
Most of the changes, as I said, I don't have an issue with, but I do take Councillor Kemp's concerns. Whilst we take the First Nation people's concerns into consideration, we also have to understand the other 99% of people in Victor that enjoy this type of celebration. So we just need to be careful that we don't use the town crier as a way of politicising an event. I don't think the town crier, it's there to give people enjoy the town crier being there, and I think it would just be concerning to start excluding him where there are purely First Nation events. Totally understand that, but where there are ones that are represent events that the majority of Victor Harbour residents enjoy, I just have concerns about that, that's all. But the other amendments I'm fine with.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Schofield?
Yes, I won't be supporting this. I believe it's discrimination, that we are supposed to be one nation, one peoples, and by putting up something like this, that it is saying that the town crier cannot attend certain services. Our town crier works as promoting Victor Harbour, and when he promotes Victor Harbour, he promotes everybody. And so I feel this is discrimination and I will not be voting for it.
Okay, does anybody else want to speak to the amendment? This is the amendment we're speaking to. In that case, then I'll put the amendment
Sorry, Mayor, I'd like to speak to this. Sorry for being late.
Sorry,
Just got
this is
caught up.
speaking to the amendment, councillor Karimba.
Councillor. Oh, it's taking me out. Yeah, I think this is a good idea. I actually apologise for being late. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Schofield. We have enough division already, and I think this gentleman does a fantastic job. I would like to see this definitely changed, and as I said, I'll be voting with the amendment.
Thank you. If there's, do you want to speak to that? Do you want to, councillor Kemp, close the debate on the amendment?
Oh, look, I think it's quite simple. The fact that, as I said, Australia Day has significance for a lot of people for their own personal reasons. And again, just keep reinforcing to weaponise Australia Day in the document of its council is wrong.
Thank you. I'll put that amendment to the vote, just noting that this is the amendment to the vote and not the recommendation. All those in favour of the amendment? 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. That amendment is passed. And the amendment now forms the motion. So we continue to debate the motion.
I have a question, if I may, on the current motion.
Certainly.
In the statement, under appropriate use of the town crier, it talks about this is required to occur prior to the next event and meet with the concurrence of the relevant parties. My question to that statement, if the parties can't meet to come to a resolution of how the town crier will be operating in an event, what happens? Does the event go ahead with the town crier, or it doesn't go ahead because you can't get parties together to have a meeting to come to a consensus of how they operate? Then it's an open. So that statement really, lets the process not go ahead. It needs to be reworded somehow.
If I may, through the Mayor. So the position description and protocols, which has always been used in previous history or in my time of being here, the town crier is usually invited to events. So it's basically on invitation of the council, which has happened before. So the council, the chamber itself, was the one that resolved to seek the guidelines. And so if that was to occur, I mean, he's usually got to be invited to an event anyway, so which he normally is. So can't see it actually happening, so that he wouldn't, we wouldn't have a chance to meet because he needs to be invited. Like we would say, we would like you to participate in a particular event. We'd like you, if he's able to attend an event as per the protocols.
Has that answered your question, councillor Kemp?
Oh, look, I'm fine with the answer. It's just, again, just seemed interesting, a statement which could actually stop the process happening.
It hasn't stopped it in the past.
Okay, I won't debate the point.
Does anybody else want to speak to the motion, which includes the amendment? Councillor Karimba?
I just have a question. I do recall that and I think it was Councillor Burns that put this motion up, that he was to be invited to all gazetted events. Is that correct? Oh, we've talked about that? Okay, my apologies. Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on this? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? No, you've voted on the amendment. You're voting on the motion. So the motion is that council approve the town crier guidelines to be applied in parallel with the Victor Harbor town crier job description and protocols document, subject to the removal of the reference to Australia Day within the guidelines. So all those in favour? And those against? That's lost. Thank you. Let's move on to 5.1, which are the minutes of the previous meeting. And the recommendation is that they be confirmed as true and correct. Councillor Schiller, you're moving that way? Do I have a seconder? Thank you very much, Councillor Burns. Are there any questions in relation to the minutes or queries? I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. There are no deputations. There was one question from the gallery, and that was refused. That was by Mr. Blatchford. That was refused under the same process as other questions from Mr. Blatchford have been refused, and he's been given the reasons for that refusal. We move to petitions. There are no petitions. The Office of the Chief Executive Officer, outstanding resolutions, and the recommendation is that Council receive and note the outstanding resolutions. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp, and seconded Councillor Henderson. Would either of you like to speak to the outstanding resolutions? No. Does anybody want to speak to them or have any questions? Councillor Burns?
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to see a sunset clause put in these. All the various resolutions are all fine, but there's no end at all. And it'd be nice to actually have some point where if they are still outstanding, they get closed rather than just have them open for year on year. That's all.
I might ask the CEO to respond to that.
Sure.
I think there's good reason for it not to have an ending on it.
Yeah, unless the council resolve for it to have an end date, it doesn't have an end date. So it's like to say that your decisions are in place forever until you revoke them or amend them. So unless the council resolves that, they don't have an end date, hence the requirement we present your outstanding resolutions, because some things are out of the council's control, the administration's control. They may be decisions that are relying on other information from other parties. So by keeping you abreast of what we're actually progressing or doing in those areas, that's what the outstanding resolutions. But to have a sunset clause on them, you would actually, as a chamber, would have to resolve that. Yeah.
And that it's more where we're waiting for information from an organisation, and if we don't get it after a reasonable period of time, which could be 6 months or a year, we have to really make a call to say, look, it's unlikely we're going to get it, and move on.
And that may be based on a discussion with the chamber, and you can then, and I can basically assess and bring a further report back saying, well, look, this has been outstanding for a period of time, and I then give you the opportunity to cease it, end it, amend the resolution.
Perfect.
So
Thank
I
you.
can do that.
Any other questions in relation to the outstanding resolutions? No, I'll put that to the vote then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We come to 9.2. We have behavioural management policy, and the recommendation is that Council adopt the behavioural management policy as provided in attachment B and undertake a review of the policy. I have spoken to Kyla in terms of some of the wording, some grammatical, very small grammatical issues, and they can be fixed. There are some times when respondent is used and the other times when person being complained about is used. I think we need some consistency for it all to be changed to respondent, and there needs to be a capital C for complainant, just as there is a capital R for respondent, and those will be dealt with.
Thank you, Mayor. In the briefing session we had about this, it was raised about concerns of having the CEO as a responsible person to assess, and my understanding was in the conversation that that was going to be taken out as a general feeling. It's still in the document.
I'm not sure that it is. I think it was removed. It was removed. It was removed.
In the
The CEO, can you show me whereabouts in the document? Sure. Because I've just been through the document.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that it was removed, and that
so if you look at attachment B, if you go to page 58, so it has the government policy says the mayor, or if there's an issue, the deputy mayor, or if there's an issue with both the deputy mayor and the mayor, it normally goes to an elected member that's been voted, and in here it's got still the chief executive officer, and it's in a couple of places through.
Okay.
No,
document.
we can strike that out. We did actually take on board that feedback from the chamber, so we hadn't
fine.
included it, but yes, we'll make sure that's struck out.
No,
I'm
thank
not
you.
sure why
That's
that
good.
came across.
I missed that one, so it's good that you.
Everything
picked it
else
up.
was as per our
So can I have a mover for that policy, please? Do you want to move that, councillor Burns? Yep. Yep. And do I have a seconder for that? Thank you, councillor Kemp. Councillor Burns, do you want to speak to that?
As long as it has the changes that we discussed, then I'm fine with it.
Yep. Thank you. Councillor Kemp?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I do have a question prior to me speaking to or for or against this. On page 63 at the bottom of the initial complaint assessment, 6.81, step 1, it states the person responsible will not investigate an anonymous complaint by law. I just want to know what law has that come from? Because under the OPI rules about how they investigate things under ICAC, they state is that they can't refuse an anonymous complaint. So I don't know what law we're operating here under.
Just give me a moment to clarify. That has come directly out of the LGA's model policy, and I know there is a reference within the Work Health Safety Act to anonymous complaints that won't be investigated, but I'll just clarify for you. But it is word for word out of the LGA's model policy.
Which page is that, if I may ask, CEO? I couldn't find it.
Can we come back to you with that one, councillor Kemp?
The reference to law can be removed. It's just the council won't investigate an anonymous complaint. So in terms of, I can find it, but if you don't need to have it in there. Again, it doesn't specify which law, as you say. So
yeah, I'm just curious if the OPI under ICAC says you can investigate anonymous complaints. That is our ruling body over the top of local government. So I'm just wondering.
No, it depends on which complaint it comes under as to which body is the overriding body.
Would I move I want to move a formal adjournment. I want to move a formal motion to adjourn this item to get an explanation of currently what the law is about, whether that statement is correct or not correct.
Do you?
It's a formal motion, so it's over to you.
Do I have a seconder for that formal motion?
And bring it back to the next council meeting.
Thank you. It's a formal motion, so there is no debate.
Well, I can have something to say on it because I'm moving it.
There's no debate on a formal motion.
No, we're not debating.
He just has explained.
Okay.
To when and what form.
Fine.
So put the formal motion to the table. All those in favour and those against? That's carried. Councillor Corimba seconded. So we move on now to 9.3. The delegations register review. So the first recommendation is that council resolves to revoke its previous delegations to the Chief Executive Officer, those powers and functions under the legislation contained in the delegations register. Moving that way, councillor Mann, thank you. And seconding by councillor Schiller. Do you want to speak to that? Councillor Schiller, do you want to speak to that? No, all those in favour? That's carried, thank you. The second recommendation is in relation to attachment B delegations, and I'll take that as read. If someone would like to move recommendation 2. Thank you, councillor Burns. And seconded by, thank you, councillor Kemp. Either of you like to speak to recommendation 2?
It aligns with what we were shown previously, so it's.
Yep, thank you. Councillor Kemp, do you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to it? Those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. Recommendation 3, I'll also take that as read. It's quite a long recommendation. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconded by, thank you, Councillor Schofield. You want to speak to that, Councillor Henderson? Councillor Schofield? Does anybody want to speak to that? Put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 4. I'll take that as read. Would someone like to move recommendation 4? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do you want to speak to that? Do you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to recommendation 4? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 5. Again, it's a long one, so I'll take that as read. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Burns. And seconded by Councillor Mann. Either of you want to speak to it? Anyone want to speak to it? All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 6. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And seconding, was that you, Councillor Kemp, or were you scratching? Okay. So what was that? Henderson and Kemp. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Schofield and Kemp. No, Henderson and Kemp. Thank you. And would either of you like to speak to that? Anyone like to speak to that? All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 7. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Burns. And seconded, Councillor Schofield. Either of you like to speak to that? Anyone like to speak to that? All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 8, the delegations provided come into operation on the 26th of September. It's tomorrow. Thank you, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that? All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 9, take that as read. Councillor Kemp moving that way, seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Burns. You want to speak to it? Anyone want to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Recommendation 10. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson and Councillor Burns seconding that. Any questions? All in favour? Those against? That's carried. Recommendation 11 relates to the Road Traffic Act. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Mann, and thank you, Councillor Schiller. Do either of you want to speak to it? Have any questions? Does anybody have any questions or want to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 12, which is general approval and delegation to Council from Minister of Transport and Infrastructure. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, and seconding that, Councillor Mann. Either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 13. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Seconding that, Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to it? Does anybody want to speak to it? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 14. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Thank you, Councillor Henderson, for seconding it. Do either of you want to speak to it? Councillor Kemp.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I do have a question. We've got 6 staff members identified here who will get that delegation to write traffic management plans. I'm just saying in the statement, appropriate level of knowledge and expertise. Can you give us, CEO, give us an overview of what is knowledge and expertise in this field and what training these staff have undertaken to write traffic management plans?
My understanding is they must have their work zone traffic management qualifications and undertaken training to be able to do this assessment under the Act. That's why they're only specifically listed.
Thank you. And why are we having so many? 6 is a lot. I'm just wondering why 6?
Because we have
3 or 4.
staff that may be on leave. There are different areas. Some may be for design work, some may be for events. So we have different officers. Again, it's just necessary at different times.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on that? I'll put it to the table. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. And lucky last is recommendation 15. Would someone like to move that way, please? Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And Councillor Burns seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to it? No. Does anybody want to speak to it? All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. It's unfortunate with the delegations that you need to go through each one of them individually and unable to do them all en bloc. We now have the 2024 Australia Day Awards. That's 9.4. And the first recommendation is that Council call for nominations for the Australia Day Awards, commencing on the 3rd of October, for the following 4 categories: Citizen of the Year, Young Citizen of the Year, Community Event of the Year, and Active Citizen of the Year. You're happy to move that way, Councillor Henderson, and seconding that, Councillor Schiller. Either of you want to speak to that? Councillor Schiller? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Mann.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I guess my only concern with this motion is that I hope that we can successfully market the applications for these positions and these awards. I think it's been a few years where some have come back without a result in or any nominations in the first instance, and we've had to go out again. So I just really hope, especially for the Young Citizen of the Year, we can really get that out into the community and encourage schools or community groups or anyone who knows an outstanding young citizen to please nominate them, because I know our town is full of them and often they're not recognised, and this is a great way to do it. So I just hope we can really promote it throughout the community.
Absolutely, Councillor Mann. I think, as you said, our town is full of them. We have the highest level of volunteering in almost the state, I think, and we have some amazing people, including young people that often go unnoticed, that do some amazing work. So we're lucky we have our editor of the Sun here taking notes, and I hope he is paying attention to the need to market it out, and we could work proactively together, Mr. Simmons, I'm sure. Does anybody else have anything that they'd like to say in relation to that first recommendation? No, in that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The second recommendation is that Council establish a Australia Day Awards selection panel consisting of 2 council members and up to 3 community representatives to assess the nominations that are received. If more than 2 members nominate for the position, then we'll go on to recommendation 3 and get a returning officer. But we'll just do that second recommendation first, that we do establish that selection panel, if someone would like to move that way. Thank you, Councillor Schiller, and seconded that, Councillor Schofield. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. So what I'll do now is ask for people to put their hands up and nominate if they're interested in being on that selection panel. If we have more than 2, then I will appoint the Chief Executive Officer as the returning officer. So those people that are interested in being on the panel, Councillor Schiller, You'd like to be on the panel. Councillor Schofield, you had your hand up. Councillor Karimba, you had your hand up. And I'd also like to be on the panel as well. And is there anybody else?
Sorry, I would, but I'll be away, so I can't. But
No
I think
problem.
it's
Thank
really
you.
worthwhile.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, were you? Yep, fantastic. All right, so what I'll do is that we'll go to recommendation 3, that the council appoints the chief executive officer as returning officer for the purpose of a secret ballot to determine council member representation for the Australia Day Awards selection panel, and authorise to declare the successful council members for that panel. You're moving that way, Councillor King?
No, just wondering if we're going to suspension of meeting procedures so we can do this.
Yes, we can call it with suspension of meeting procedures in order to do that, but that's the way that we need to do it. So are you all happy to come out of meeting procedures? Well, I just tried to do that, but I was told by our Deputy Mayor that I was unable to do that. So I continue what I was doing. I will continue doing what I was doing.
Sorry, Mayor Jenkins,
Councillor,
I thought you didn't go out of meeting procedures. And
no,
asked for
there's no need for me to go out of meeting procedures, Deputy Mayor Kemp, until we have appointed the Chief Executive Officer, and then we will go out of meeting procedures. All right. So I will continue as I was. Recommendation 3 is that council appoints the Chief Executive Officer as the returning officer for the purpose of a secret ballot. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Burns, and seconding Councillor Schiller. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. I will now call for a suspension of meeting procedures so that the Chief Executive Officer is able to, in accordance with our nomination and appointment to internal and external positions, go through the ballot process. Can you put up your hand if you're happy for me to do that? Thank you very much.
So members, Kyla is going to provide you with a piece of paper, and if you could mark clearly your 2 preferred members to be on the panel, noting that there are 4 nominations: Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield, Councillor Karimba and Mayor Jenkins. Can you just mark your preferred 2 members to be on the panel, please?
Is it too late for me to? And we do 2 members.
I say members, so I have a tied vote with 3 members receiving 4 votes. Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Mayor Jenkins all received 4 votes. Councillor Kurumba received 3. So given we are looking for 2 positions, I'm going to give you another ballot paper and I'd like you to identify your 2 preferred members on that ballot paper. Noting your 3 candidates now, Councillor Schiller, Councillor Schofield and Mayor Jenkins. Actually. The 2 members with the highest number of votes are Councillor Schofield and Councillor Schiller are the 2 nominated candidates.
Congratulations, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Schiller. I'll now call for us to go back into meeting procedures. Everyone's happy with that? Thank you. The recommendation is that Council appoints Councillor Schofield and Councillor Schiller to the Australia Day Awards selection panel. Would someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Henderson, and seconding Councillor Burns. Either of you want to speak to that?
Good candidates.
I think so too. All those in favour? That's unanimously passed, or carried, I should say. Congratulations to you both, and I think you'll both be excellent candidates for that. Number 5, that the council call for expressions of interest in order to fill the 3 community representative positions. Councillor Kemp, you're moving that way. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Burns. Either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. We move to 9.5, the asset management plans and long-term financial plans for 2023-24 to 2032-33. I'm happy to do those on block, do those 2 recommendations on block, if you are all happy with that. Councillor Schiller moving on block and Councillor Henderson seconding that. Do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to it? Councillor Burns.
Only in regard to the long-term financial plan, when we had the draft presented to us, put in a request that it included in the strategic direction development of a blue water economy for Victor Harbour, and that hasn't been included. There is a reference to certain projects, including some like marinas and so forth, but the blue economy is a large part of our economy, and I think within 10 years we should also have strategies of how we utilise that as well. Everything else was okay.
You had that reference that in the investment attraction strategy. You didn't refer to it in the long-term financial plan.
Is there any further
Which it has been incorporated in, sorry.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Kemp?
Just a couple of items for clarification questions. Basically, on page 100, we talk about the 5.5% increase in rate revenue of about $150 per year, spread across 3 years, which is above CPI. I understand that the long-term financial plan has operating costs as well, but what will be the percentage continuation of the operating side of the sports precinct? We've dropped from 5.5% down to, because that includes capital, then it drops to operating. So I just wondering what the operating above CPI will be.
Kelly Knight Stacey may be able to answer that for you, Councillor.
Thank you, through the Mayor. So the increase in the rates above CPI is actually for the operating side. So that amount includes interest on borrowings. It includes the depreciation that will come on, as well as the operations of the precinct. So we need those increases above CPI for 3 years, and then basically that becomes the new base going forward.
So if I understand that correctly, if I may, and please correct me if I'm wrong, so we'll continue to have 5.5% per annual every year on operating above CPI.
Through the Mayor, no. So what happens each year is you'll have your last year's base rates, and then we have a rate rise that year. Then we have a new base for the following year. So it'll be the same with the additional 5.5% that across those 3 years. Once that's built in, we have a new base. And then in the 4th year, the rates will go up by only CPI or whatever council decides at that time.
Thank you. The other question I have, I believe, through to the CEO, if you don't mind, Mayor. On page 100, it talks about the sports precinct with the $20 million build. Depending on grant fund, we may get that. Now, is the way it's written, if we don't get the grant funding, it won't go ahead. I'm just wondering, what about the expression of interest? Because there's no commentary about the expression of interest. That may be an option. So I'm just wondering, are we locking ourselves in under the commentary?
Through the Mayor, I understand your question, but obviously the $10 million contribution from council is its cap. It doesn't mean it can't get any other funding or support, whether that be by way of grant funding or the expression of interest process. So it's more to do with council's capacity, let alone not the partnerships that we may have.
Thank you.
Any further discussion in relation to recommendation 1 and 2? In that case, I'll put them both to the floor. Those in favour? Those against? That's carried, thank you. The 9.6 is the annual business plan, the proposal for early community engagement. And I'm happy to do that en bloc if you would be happy for me to do that as well. Happy to move en bloc, Councillor Henderson, thank you. And do I have a seconder? Councillor Schofield. Do you want to speak to that, either of you? No? Councillor Burns, you want to speak to it, and then Councillor Karemba.
Of the 2 recommendations, I'm agreeing with one but disagreeing with the other, so I can't do it en bloc.
I asked if anybody wanted to do it en
I
bloc, and I waited.
Turning the pages to find the relevant bit, so apologies for that.
Councillor Henderson and Councillor Schofield, are you happy to move and second just recommendation 1?
Yes, that's fine by me.
And Councillor Schofield, thank you very much. Does anybody have anything that they want to say in relation to recommendation 1? that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Recommendation 2, that council trial and engagement campaign early so that the community have an opportunity to provide early input into our annual budgeting process. In relation to the communication plan attached, would someone like to move that way? Councillor Henderson, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Schiller, thank you. Councillor Henderson or Councillor Schiller, would either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Burns, you wanted to speak to that?
No, I was just seconding, that's all.
You're seconding that? Councillor Schiller seconded that. Okay, do you want to speak to it at all? No? If no one wants to speak to it, Councillor Koremba, you want to speak to it?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a couple of things. I guess where it says here, making a deputation, we're talking about community engagement. At the end of the day, the deputation is decided whether it's permissible by the Mayor. So I would not really call that an opportunity to talk, because at the end of the day, it may not be something that's allowed. The other thing that I'm concerned about is we're going to shut down. I think there was a town hall, was the previous, what we used to do was have a town hall meeting. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, if I may, back in 2011, that was the item. So it didn't happen all the time. Obviously, through COVID, it didn't occur. It was held in here, not a town hall meeting.
Okay.
It was held in here. It was an opportunity for input. But there is obviously a communications plan on other ways in which we want to engage with the community.
Yeah, I guess I would like to be, I guess if we're going to consult with the community, I'd like the elected members to be part of that consultation or be here to hear what the community have to say, and all these other, interactions with social media, pulling people up, I think more direct. I'm assuming that's face to face. Are we talking about setting up little listening posts? Is that kind of what you're intending to do?
It's as per the communications plan. There's a number of different ways that community like us to pretty much go to them as opposed to they come to us. So having those listening posts have been very, very effective in the past, in the main street, in the shopping centres, in various locations.
Yeah. Is there no reason why we could do both? Why we couldn't just have say like we did, an open forum and invite them in?
I guess from past history, the attendance has been, or we've had more participation through those other methods. That's why we're just looking to try something different. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we maybe just need to, not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and maybe look at how we can engage people in our community, other than the ways you've said. But I would still think that a good town hall where people can come and talk to even the elected members would be good.
Yep, we still hold a community meeting when we do the engagement on a draft as well. So this is actually in the lead up to that. So there is quite a lengthy process in which we engage with the community, which does include a public meeting for our draft annual business plan and budget that we held this year as well.
Okay, so we're not precluding the connection with elected members at any stage then?
Absolutely not. We actually like you to participate in the listening posts, because we actually encourage you all to come along. And in the past, we've had a number of members that actually participate and support the staff, because we're actually doing it together. It's not a them and another thing.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Are there any further discussion? In that case, I'll put the recommendation to the vote. All those in favour and those against? Sorry, Councillor Burns, I'm not sure whether you've... Can we start that again, please? All those in favour? The second one. All those in favour of recommendation 2, can you put your hand up? Thank you. And those against recommendation 2? Thank you. Recommendation 2 has passed, been carried unanimously. We now move to 9.7, certification of financial statements, and the recommendation is to authorise myself and the CEO to certify the annual financial statements in their final form for the 2022-23, 23-24 and 24-25 years as per the current term of council. Would someone like to move that way, please? Councillor Henderson and again Councillor Schofield. And do either of you want to speak to that? Does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Kemp.
Thanks, Mayor Jenkins. Just a question. If we project out for the next couple of years to give you authorisation to sign off on the financial statements. What if we find there's issues within the financial statements, you just get carte blanche to sign off on? What about correcting any issues within there before sign off?
This is the final form that if you read the recommendation, Councillor Kemp, it says the annual financial statements in their final form. So they would have gone through the auditing process and they will be in their final form to sign off. They would have come to council to be endorsed by council as well.
Thank you for the clarification, Mayor.
Thank you. Are there any further questions about this? In that case, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We have community and development and the festivals and events sponsorship program, round 1. I'm happy to do those recommendations on block, but we can also do them separately. And I'll give you some time to think about it. All right, does someone want to move them on block? Thank you, Councillor Burns and Councillor Henderson. Do either of you want to speak to them?
No, we'd gone through all these in depth previously and they're identical to what we discussed. So.
Thank you. And Councillor Henderson?
I would just like to make a comment that I think this council needs to look at increasing the funding for these. It is difficult to manage the applications, and we're looking to still grow festivals and events. The ones listed here have all been run before, so they've all been very efficient and verified, but we still need that capacity to grow. But if we're going to encourage that capacity to grow, we need to expand the funding to allow that to happen.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. And I agree that we are growing and our festivals and events are growing, and we need to have a look at that further down the track. Anything else? Councillor Krember, you were part of the sponsorship team, weren't you? You were.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was, and yes, they're all worthy applicants, and I agree that you know, I agree in part with Councillor Henderson about increasing the amount of festivals and things we have here. Where I guess I differ is that I don't think we should be fronting up more money, ratepayer money, especially during a cost of living crisis. I do think that we should find other ways within council, whether it's in kind or just being open for business would be a much better avenue. I went down to the Rock and Roll Festival and I was a little bit disappointed to see that the main street wasn't being used. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but that used to be a good area. We could separate the two, and also the main street traders that I spoke to were quite upset about the fact that they missed out on a lot of business because people weren't potentially going in that area. So that may be something we may look at in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Karemba. Any further discussion? In that case, I'll put those recommendations on block. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Victor Cinema Management, and the recommendation is that council endorse an extension to the current management with Country Arts SA to operate the Victor Cinema for a further 1 year period. Thank you. Moving that way, Councillor Schiller. And seconding that. Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Seem to have the same people moving and seconding motions tonight. Thank you very much for doing that. Do either of you want to speak to this? Councillor Burns.
I just wanted to confirm that the costs for the last year, the income for last year met all the costs. Just wanted to confirm.
Kelly, maybe, or Graham? Graham or Kelly, which one of you have an answer to that?
Just through the Mayor, just to clarify, for the overall operation of the cinema, yes, give or take, it was marginal to buy.
Only because it's mentioned in the agreement, that's the intent of the managing.
Correct.
To cover the costs.
Yep.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We have a donation request at 11.1 for the Fleurieu Road Safety Group replacement of their promotional trailer. And you'll see in the background that the Fleurieu Road Safety Group's been using this trailer as part of their safety awareness programs. And it's 22 years old, so they're requesting some money from us, Alexandrina and Yankalilla Council. This recommendation is to approve the request for $1,000 towards the purchase of a new promotional trailer. Moving that way, Councillor Schofield and Councillor Burns. Do either of you want to say anything?
It's a good cause.
They do some significant work in the community, and not just in our community in the Fleurieu, all over South Australia. And if their group is able to save one life, then it makes it very worthwhile. Is there any further discussion? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour and those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. And if they are listening online or they're here, congratulations. I think you do a wonderful job. We now move to environment and infrastructure, and we go to our park and street furniture donation and memorial plaque policy review. And the recommendation is that council endorse the policy as provided at attachment A. Moving Councillor Schiller and seconding that Councillor Burns. Do either of you want to speak to it?
So again, it's something we've gone in depth and discussed previously. So
Thank you. Councillor Schiller, did you want to say anything? Does anybody else have any questions about it? No, I'll put it to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We now move to a application for park and street furniture memorial plaque, a fee waiver request. And this is from in relation to Mr. Peter Lewis, who many of you would know. Peter was a councillor for 12 years in the City of Victor Harbor. He was awarded the 2022 Citizen of the Year Award. And did a lot of work around community groups, local fundraising, promotion, did a lot of work around homelessness and fundraising for homelessness, and is sorely missed by our community. The recommendation is that council endorse a fee waiver of $3,170.15 for an existing bench site at the Causeway. Would you like to move that way, Councillor Burns, and seconding that, Councillor Schofield? Would you like to say anything, Councillor Burns?
just that it's good that we can do some recognition of some outstanding people in the community. So
yeah, thank you. And Councillor Schofield?
Yes, I would. The amount of work that Peter has done for the community over many years is testament to where we sit today, in particular within the tourism and the marketing of Victor Harbor, not only at a state, national, but also international level. I believe that the seat that Glenys chose down by the horse tram that looks over the island and out to sea is a very special place, or was a very special place for Peter. And I think it's very fitting that this request has come to us.
Thank you, Councillor Schofield. Does anybody else want to say anything? In that case, I'll put it to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That's a unanimous decision by the council. And I know that Glenys is watching online, and she'll be very happy with that, and very, very well deserved for Peter Lewis, who did an outstanding job throughout his life here in Victor Harbor. We now move on to 12.3. The gifting of land. There's a bit of noise from the gallery, which is a little bit distracting, if you don't mind. Gifting of land, Lot B Range Road, and I'm happy to do that on block unless you'd like to do it separately. Happy to do it on block. Move that way, Councillor Henderson, and seconding Councillor Schofield. Thank you to our gallery members. Do either of you want to speak to that? No, does anybody want to speak to that? Councillor Burns.
I was quite conflicted because I really wanted to do something for the Wapinga community, but I'm already conscious that council is investing or pursuing other land with quite significant fauna to keep, and I'm just probably a bit concerned that the cost, if this goes ahead with some of the proposed usage for that area, may be quite extensive for the council. So I won't be voting against this, unfortunately. Sorry, I will not be supporting this, unfortunately.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to speak to this or against this motion? No, in that case, I will put the recommendation on block to the floor. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. Minutes of council meetings, 13.1, we have the Recreation Centre Management Committee meeting, and the recommendation is to receive and note the minutes. Someone like to move that way? Thank you, Councillor Schofield. And Councillor Kemp. Anyone want to speak to that motion or have any questions? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. Blueoa Regional Community Services Advisory Committee. Someone like to move that those minutes are received? Thank you, Councillor Schofield, Schiller. And seconding that, thank you, Councillor Henderson. Either of you like to speak to that? Councillor Schofield, Schiller.
Just a couple of comments there. This committee has got a project on the go at the moment, which is a project where people can come and learn about how to put their advanced care directive together. So it's a great project that over the councils is being looked at. I've also put the question to this particular committee to look at possibility of looking at options of whether some form of legal graffiti project could be potentially looked at. Haven't got an opinion as to whether that's a good or a bad idea, but thought it's worth, as a council, having a look at where this has happened in other council areas and what effect it's had for the better or for the worse.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. And yes, both of those are really important initiatives as well. The Advanced Care Directive one I'm involved in through the HAC, so I understand the importance of that for this council. Is there any further discussion in relation to that recommendation? I'll put that to the floor then. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We have the subsidiaries and representative reports now. The first one being the Fleurieu Regional Aquatic Centre Authority Audit and Risk Management Committee member reappointment. And that recommendation is relating to endorsing the Audit and Risk Committee members as per below. I'll take that as read. Would someone like to move that way? Councillor Kemp and Councillor Schofield. Either of you want to speak to that? Anyone want to speak to that or have any questions? All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Thank you. We have questions on notice. The 16.1, first lot from David Kemp, and your answers are there and will be put, they will be in the minutes of this meeting. So then we move to questions without notice. Does anybody have any questions without notice? Councillor Schiller.
Two questions. I received a phone call from Orcus Taxis prior to the meeting, very short notice. The questions that I had was that they have had some conversations with administration I don't know if it was today, but her concern was that she is having to get from, I think it's Cartwright Street through to Green Hills, and her concern was that because she's having to get her taxis out first thing in the morning, 7:30, and a bus at about 10, I think, and whether there's a possibility to grant any kind of exemption there for that particular business because of the nature of the business. So whether by asking that question, whether a motion may need to be put later. The other question I had was...
Sorry, can I just interrupt for a minute, Councillor Schiller, in relation to that one? Is this on a particular day or is this every day?
Sorry, this is for the upcoming marathon that's coming up on October 8th, is it? Yes. Yep. So that's the issue, is the road closures that are occurring.
So she would like an exemption to drive on the road?
She's just trying to find a way that she can get her taxis into town, and because I don't know the conversations that have been had and whether the request is, you know, a legitimate question, and whether she could be accommodated in some way, and whether we wish to look at that.
Councillor Schiller, it's Victoria. I will take that on notice and follow up what conversations have already been had with our staff and look into the matter further.
I think that can I just make one little comment? I guess she was sort of saying that, you know, it is an essential sort of business, but I realised that once you open that can of worms of allowing one business through, but just maybe if that could be a larger conversation could be had with her to see if you can be accommodated. And her other query was whether there is an actual, we know the street closures, but whether there is an actual map that she could be given to her drivers rather than just the naming of the streets.
Yes, there will be maps provided. So again, we'll follow that one up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Schiller. Other questions without notice? Councillor Burns.
Thank you. I have two questions, both two parts. One, in the recent briefing session we had about the flood and stormwater report, which is a very good report, by the way. There were flood maps for the City of Victor included. I just had a question, is that the same flood maps that are used for development applications, or is this a new one that's been done and not? I was just a general inquiry, because I understand it's available on the website to look at.
It will be, so they'll be going out for consultation. So once they've gone out for consultation and they come back to council for final endorsement, and then we submit them to the Stormwater Management Authority, and then they are uploaded and available publicly through the state planning and in every other council. So they become more current. Okay. So obviously that's why we've done the flood mapping, because it is more current based on population growth and building growth and density. Okay.
My other question was, I was reading with some concern, and it may not have an impact here, but the Brisbane City Council had a legal case against Technology One, which I believe has now been settled. I just wanted the CEO to assure elected members that everything is still going okay with the rollout of the new software system, and it's still on budget and meeting all project lines. I see the two as separate, but I was just concerned that it's the first I'd heard there was any issues with the software in any council.
I'm unaware of the issue, so I'm not prepared to comment until I've had a look at what it's about.
Yeah, sure.
So yeah, I'll take that on notice.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other? Councillor Kurembo.
Thank you, Mayor. I think, and I just sort of looked at this as well regarding Tech One. I believe there's an article, it was 2017 was when this issue came up. And it is Brisbane City Council literally going to drop, I think it was $122 million, don't quote me on that figure, of contracts with Tech One, and it turned out that they started suing each other. I'm just wondering if the CEO didn't know about this, what level of due diligence was done on Tech One prior to acknowledging that this was the system we were going with, because that's quite a big lawsuit, and Brisbane City Council is probably one of the biggest councils in the country. So I would have thought that'd be something that would have kind of come across our radar when we were going to implement a new operating system.
Well, like I said, I am unaware of the matter. I'll have a look at it. Obviously, 73% of councils in Australia use Technology One, so I'm sure it's not the only court case that they've experienced. So I'll look into the matter.
Are there any other questions without notice? No, then we will move on to motions on notice. And the first one is motion on notice relating to the fire safety Victor Cinema. And this, you'll see Councillor Kemp's motion. There is an alternative recommendation there that has been proposed by the administration. Councillor Kemp, would you like to propose your motion?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I'd just like to take leave of the meeting, if it's possible, to answer a question that people may have in their minds about a statement in the commentary about how unclear that I have found myself in a position to make such qualified determination of fire safety. I can provide the chamber with my knowledge and background if the chamber would like to have that knowledge prior to my moving my motion.
I will ask the chamber if, can you raise your hands if you would like the meeting to stop so that Councillor Kemp can explain why he feels he has the knowledge. Those, raise your hand if you want the meeting to stop. No, sorry, Councillor Kemp. Your 5 minutes starts now. I beg your pardon, Councillor Kemp, 3 minutes. The meeting procedures have changed.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. Does the time starts after my motion or it starts at the beginning of my motion because I got my commentary? Just a clarification, please.
If you read your motion, and then the time will start after you have read your motion, as it always does after every motion, Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. Just a clarification. Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. I move that the council undertake rectification works to make the fire safety systems and disability access to meet the adequate standards in the Victor Cinema. These works to commence immediately as required by the Minister's Building Standard 0001, upgrading health and safety in existing buildings as identified in the Building Inspection Fire Safety Reports of 2020, and to include the required number of fire escapes exit direct access to the external part of the building in the upstairs cinema, which is Cinema 1. This motion is about public safety, which must be the priority of this council. Is council exposed to liability if we do nothing, and sometimes it happens? There's an old adage, every day you do not fix a problem, you are a day closer for something to go wrong. Life is inherently risky. There's only one big risk you should avoid at all costs, and that is the risk of doing nothing. The City of Victor Harbor established a Building Fire Safety Committee which should have regard to the types of buildings and occupancies within its area of jurisdictions, and to identify those that may constitute a high fire safety risk and need to be systematically inspected, for instance, in line with this motion. Buildings where large crowds congregate during operating hours, such as shops or assembly buildings, might be identified as a high risk priority. The Victor Cinema is identified as an assembly building. Rectification work is to rectify known problems. We know what is written in those reports. These rectification works is to bring the systems up to an adequate standard as identified in the reports of 2020. The rectification works could be seen as minor works in the scheme of things and can be uptaken through identifying a contractor and selecting a contractor under the council procurement policy. 3 years the council has been aware of the reports and what is entailed in them. I ask a rhetoric question of members, considering what you know now, have we followed due diligence? The Minister's Building Standard 001 sets out the legislative circumstances in the Act and regulations that can trigger the need to upgrade parts, elements or systems in existing buildings to reduce and identify health and safety risks. We understand that the full compliance with the fire safety systems and disability access will take place once the Arts and Culture Centre, as per the Minister's Building Standards and the PDI Act, once the construction commences as planned in 2031, 32, 32 and 33. Another rhetoric questions for members. Is this far too long a time frame, and would this time frame be assessed as extreme risk if we wait until then? Local government councils play an important role in protecting the ongoing safety of building occupiers and users through the provisions of the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act of 2016, the PDI Act. Section 157 of the PDI Act established the power for a council to investigate whether building owners are maintaining proper levels of fire safety in their buildings for the protection of all occupiers. whether they be residents, workers, or use them regularly, or clients and visitors who only use them occasionally. Another rhetoric question for members. What we know now is this council follows section 157 of the PDI Act 2016 in the past 3 years. The questions around the fact is that...
That's your
30
30 seconds.
Thank you.
Bill.
Yes, the issue is around about not doing major compliance work. Minister standard will come into effect if we actually have to do full compliance works or alterations to the building. But this is about rectification of a current known problem and just to bring it up to an adequate standard. And that's all this motion's about, to actually move that forward so we actually can achieve it and to make it a far more environmentally friendly, safer building for our people to use. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kemp. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Seconding that, Councillor Henderson. Would you like to speak?
I am seconding the motion, but I will not be supporting it because I think there are all sorts of problems with this particular motion on the table. And if it doesn't pass, then I will be recommending the alternative motion. There's insufficient detail in this motion as to what an upgrade would entail. The motion cross-references two documents which actually serve different purposes. The reference to MBS 001 is not relevant as circumstances have not arisen that would make it applicable. Those circumstances would be any work that had begun or done on the cinema complex. The motion also fails to address what an adequate standard for disability would be, and MBS 001 doesn't use this terminology. The terminology used is sufficient rather than adequate. In any case, it would require an appropriate authority to determine whether or not the current situation is inadequate, rather than just an assumption by a single elected member that it is not. If Councillor Kemp is so concerned about safety and accessibility of the cinema, I would have thought he would have raised this during our budget deliberations and argued to bring the first stage of the Arts and Culture Centre forward rather than pushing it out further and further. And that has been the case with not only this council but the previous council. I believe that there has been too much procrastination and pushing that project out in order to bring, for example, the sports precinct forward. If we hadn't kept pushing the first stage of the Arts and Culture Centre out, then we may well by this stage have been doing the appropriate work on the cinema complex.
Thank you, Councillor Henderson. Does anybody else want to speak for or against the motion? Councillor Burns.
Just a clarification, it was raised during the budget discussions that I recall, not to do with the fire compliance. My question is, in 2020, was the cinema compliant to the building code standards and fire regulation standards at the time? Because in reading the report, it implies that there were some issues that needed urgent addressing, and I understand that a lot of the work was tied in with the Arts Centre, which didn't go ahead in the last council, and it's been 3 years, and we're now looking to the, I think we've got scheduled long-term financial plan. You know, we're still talking another 7 to 8+ years. That is a long time not to address it. Now, it may have been addressed. I just couldn't see that in the documents that I read. And
Director Pathurst, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah, thanks. Through the Mayor. The matter of compliance in 2020, if you mean in terms of compliance with the ministerial standard that requires certain things to happen at certain times, it hadn't met a trigger to establish that. If you mean in compliance with modern building codes, bearing in mind that the building was built many years ago, it's not compliant with modern building codes.
No, I wasn't talking about that because I understand that would be bundled in with development work. I was talking about, if you read the report, there's a number of health and safety risks with exposure wires and so forth. Was that addressed back then or since then?
It was, yes.
Okay.
And some of those things are still being addressed. That was a 3 to 5, that was with a 1 to 5 year period
Okay.
to be reviewed again at the 3 to 5 year
Because
mark.
the report identified, but didn't actually, I couldn't find anything to say that'd been addressed in that. That was my concern.
Perhaps, I think, probably been addressed in previous responses back to council over the weeks and months that we've been having this conversation.
Sure. Yep. Okay. And is it on the risk register? Because I couldn't recall seeing it on the risk register.
I'd have to take that on notice.
Sure.
There's a risk profile in terms of the project itself.
Yep.
But I'd have to take that on notice.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, hang on, the CEO can answer that one.
Are you referring our strategic risk register? Or what register you're referring to?
The one that goes to the audit committee and to the council, which I've.
So we have a
Same thing.
strategic risk register, which it does not appear on because we would say we've got mitigations in place. It's not on our, obviously elements of it, maybe on our operating risk register.
Okay.
And it's not a particular project at this current time. So that's where it wouldn't appear. So it depends on
So it
which
may be
register.
on
We've
your-
got a number of them.
But it may be on your it's on a risk register somewhere.
If there's elements that have not been addressed, yes, it would be, but it's not a strategic risk of councils.
Okay.
Councillor Corimba, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I just got a couple of questions. Can I ask Councillor Kemp a question?
Through me, you can.
Yep, I just want to know what his, I guess, experience as to how he came up with such a detailed
I'm
motion.
not going to allow that question, Councillor Corimba. Councillor Kemp wanted to stop meeting procedures in order to outline that.
Yeah.
I think that's not a question directly in relation to the recommendation.
Right, okay. I guess my other question then is, it's probably got a few parts, and I'm looking at an old report that I think previous council got prior to buying this building. It was done by some electrician and some other building inspectors. It's marked confidential, but I think the confidentiality was around prior to the building being bought. Now that the building is not being, or has been bought, are those reports, because some of the things I've read in there, it's 174 pages, and I'm hoping that other elected members have read this, are quite scary when it comes to, and I'm a builder, comes quite scary when we're talking about some of the electrical issues with the building. So I'm just wondering if we can actually talk to that report.
Graham, can you talk to that?
Yes, through the mayor, the report was taken out of confidence once the contracts were finalised for the purchase of the building.
Okay. Actually, a question for Director Padhouse. In your report, you mentioned that some of the electrical system was messy, I think was the term you used. But I've read the electrician's report, and there's a subboard, and I'm hoping it's been replaced now, but it's actually got, I think he determined it to be the needed urgent upgrade. It doesn't have any RCDs. I'm just wondering, has that subboard been replaced?
Through the mayor, all the things that you find in that report from the electrician were completed within the first couple of months of having the cinema. So that was addressed immediately because of the risk associated with that work.
Okay. And the other question I had was, is there, I'm not sure, I did read somewhere that that we weren't going to make the building disability compliant, but we were going to put in some flat platforms so that we could have wheelchairs in certain cinemas. Is that's already happened, I assume?
Correct. That was done in the ground floor cinema. There's a back space with a level area.
Yeah.
That was all rectified to cater for that.
And final question, are there any fire escapes from the upstairs cinema? The reason I ask is if there's a fire in the foyer of this building, if there are no fire escapes upstairs, how do people get out of the building?
The fire escapes through the two stairs that are there at the moment. There's not another or third external to that area, but that was addressed and considered by the fire safety engineer at the time. So it would be one of those things that need to be addressed at the point in time that the ministerial standard kicks in that Councillor Kemp refers to.
Yeah.
And that's when council seek to upgrade the building.
So I guess we should probably let the community know that if there is a fire in the foyer, and where all the offices are, and probably some of the substandard electrical services that I saw when we went through, when you showed me through there, there are no exits other than to come down into the foyer that's on fire. Is that right?
I think we'd need to let the community know that they follow the fire safety exit signs, which are the required exits out of the building in the event that the building would need to be evacuated for fire or any other reason.
Yeah, but those
Thank
exits.
you, councillor Coimbra. That was your question?
Yeah.
Well, your question was answered. Are there any further questions? Councillor Schiller.
Once a detailed design comes in, will we, obviously you have a plan set in place and you will be able to prioritise compliance on a gradual basis. We're not going to be locked into doing all of those requirements within the new plan that's forthcoming. That's a question.
Okay, Graham.
Through the mayor, well, it could be staged, but it would be a matter for council to consider once it sees those plans, which are imminent in the next few weeks. They'll be in front of council to review and to consider what the compliance requirements might need to be, bearing in mind that once it does become a building approval, council would then need to act on it as well. But there may be opportunity to stage some of that out, but council would be best advised to review that in the context of the staged plans when they come in.
Thank you, councillor Schiller. Does anybody else have any other questions? Councillor Mann.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Jenkins. No, I thank Councillor Kemp for raising this. I do know it is a particular area of expertise he has. For the past 5 years, I've known him. I know his background in the fire safety space and the profession that he worked in. So I definitely do take all of that into account in assessing this. But I also take into account the 3 pages of commentary outlining issues with his proposed motion as he's worded it, put forward. And based on that commentary, and I'm not going to go through it because it's all in the report, I'm not going to be supporting his motion. I think in terms of the alternative recommendation, I don't think we need to put that up or even support it because it's just going to be voting for what we're going to do anyway. No, I appreciate Councillor Kemp raising this, but I think it's going to be dealt with within the process that has been outlined by administration. But it's definitely on the radar in that respect.
Thank you, councillor Mann. Councillor Kemp, would you like to close the debate? If there's no, I'll just better check if there are any further questions. Councillor Coimbra, you have a question?
Thank you, I do. It's just regarding, and I'm pretty sure all the other elected members would have got this email from I think it's Norman Waterhouse regarding liability. I think maybe Councillor Byrne, was it you that asked to get this email? Yeah, and I just wanted to sort of note or ask the question. It says here something about we recommend that the council invite the BFSC to inspect the building to ensure compliance with fire safety provisions. And the BFC may also independently determine whether fire safety of the building is presently adequate and whether the fire safety upgrades are required. If the fire safety of the building is not adequate, this could result in potential liability of council in respect of negligence, occupiers liability and any other or other the Work Health Safety Act. So I just want to know when they refer to council, they're referring to all the elected members as well. That's correct. It's not administration. So we are liable if there is an issue and it's found out that there is an issue and we did nothing about it. Is that correct?
Through the Mayor, I don't think you're actually reading the advice correctly. So it's saying once the Building Fire Safety Committee has been through the building and they, as the appropriate authority, have identified areas where council may need to mitigate, and we have an opportunity to address those issues. If we don't address them once they've been identified by the Building Fire Safety Committee and we choose to ignore them, that's when we as a council, and the council is the corporation as an organisation, would obviously have some challenges. So,
okay, thank you for that clarification. I guess who makes up the Building Fire Safety Committee?
That's referred to on the questions on notice in the agenda. We've listed the names of those individuals. They're qualified building surveyors. They are Metropolitan Fire Service, Country Fire Service. the list is on the page of questions.
Is
on
there anybody
notice.
from council on that as well, or is it?
Yes, there is a council
As you
building
see in your
officer.
agenda.
who
I haven't
has-
seen the email, Mayor, sorry.
It's in your agenda.
Oh, okay,
Councillor.
okay.
So if you've read your
Great.
agenda, you should have
I
it.
must have missed that page.
Sorry,
Thank
it's in accordance with the Act. So the PDI Act requires us to have a Building Fire Safety Committee,
you. Okay,
and it specifies the qualifications of who should be on it, and all of those members are on it are qualified. That includes a council officer.
Yep.
And they are on there, yes.
okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions before we go to councillor Kemp to close the debate? Councillor Kemp, would you like to close the debate?
Thank you, Mayor Jenkins. It's interesting, the commentary that came from the chamber, and I appreciate the input from the members. It's interesting to find that when I wrote this motion of notices about if these minor works undertake, and it looked like there could be some alterations in the building, then the Minister's building standard will take effect, and that will come into play. But when you look at in the commentary about, well, my motion doesn't actually clarify exactly what work has to be done. Well, I think when you look at the building inspection and fire safety reports, they explicitly say what has to be done. So I don't think I need to put them into my motion. What has to be laid out, I think it's quite clear. And this is not about being full compliant to fire safety. It's about being to set them up to an adequate standard. And what's required in there is better early warning systems to be upgraded, to give a better warning to the occupants of the building. It also doesn't have a notification or sounder for occupation of the building. In other words, you're in the cinema, according to the report, if the alarm goes off, the occupants won't know anything about the alarm, because there's no audible sounding device to actually alert the people of the building. The only way that would happen is the projectionist, if he's not caught up in the situation, will notify and turn maybe on the PA system. But again, the upstairs cinema is an interesting one as well, because you are putting people in, if there is a fire in the foyer, as Councillor Kroonber said, what would happen? You're asking people to go downstairs into a fire area and smoke. And that is not what I would deem to be adequate for the upstairs cinema. So this is about public safety, and us not addressing the issues now, to me, is negligence on this council, because we know the problems. It only might take a little bit of work to get them up to speed, but at least, you know, we should be able to provide a better warning system than what's currently in that building. And that's all this motion is about. It's just providing that earlier warning system, which is inadequate at the moment. So I hope you think about it and change your mind in the next 30 seconds, because that's all you got left, because I haven't got much more to say apart from that. It is about safety. It's about getting things in place and making sure it's done. And the reports there identify exactly what has to be done. The costings have been done there. Maybe they need to be a little bit extra money put into it. But again, it's part of that process we need to undertake. And I guess we'll have to wait and see how the vote goes, but I can certainly, it is an area which needs to be addressed immediately, not later.
Thank you, councillor Kemp. I will now put your motion to the floor. All those in favour? Those against? That motion is lost. Thank you. Would like a division? All those in favour? That is councillor Burns, councillor Karemba, councillor Kemp, and those against, councillor Mann, councillor Schiller, councillor Henderson and councillor Schofield. That motion is lost. There is a second motion, alternative motion there, if anybody wants to. If anyone wants to move the alternative motion. You said, councillor Henderson, that you're interested.
I did say I would move, but based on what councillor Mann said, I think it's probably irrelevant, because we are going to do this in any case.
Okay, thank you. And councillor Schiller, you happy with that? Yep, thank you. All right, we move now on to motions without notice. Are there any motions without notice from elected members? If not, confidential items. And The first one is relating to the Horse Tram Authority, and the first recommendation is that we move into confidence because the agenda item is information the disclosure of which could reasonably be expected to confer a commercial advantage on a person with whom the council is proposing to conduct business. Moved that way, Councillor Henderson. Seconded that way, Councillor Mann. All those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gallery, for your participation, or want of a better word, tonight. We're moving into confidence, so it's appropriate that you leave at this point.
Mayor Jenkins, could we just have a 5-minute comfort break while the gallery's moving out?
Yes, we certainly can.